All right, so we can get started.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So thanks for picking our session. Thanks for being patient with us. We appreciate that. So go ahead to the next one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we're going to get started.
If it will let me. Oh, it's all the end. Okay. All right. So what?
All right,
so
we're getting feedback. It's replaying everything that I was saying.
See if I can lower the volume a little bit.
Hold on a second.
Holding.
We are getting feedback. I'm talking and 20 seconds later, we're hearing it all again.
I'm talking so I can check.
Okay.
I can talk. I can go over the housekeeping. Would that be good?
Mouse not moving.
Hello?
We're seeing if we're still getting the feedback.
Okay.
I think we're good now. It
Yeah,
sounds
Okay.
pretty
Sync.
All right, let's just go ahead and get started and then.
Okay. So do you want to talk about housekeeping before we get started? Hello?
Yeah.
Serious delay.
Julie?
That was not the right response for me. I wasn't trying to you, my bad.
Oh, that's Meredith. Hi, Mare.
I want to make sure you can get on.
Yeah, I can, but can I start talking or no?
You can hear me, but she's saying the house.
So it's replaying.
What?
See?
Oh. Wow.
Groundhog Day.
I see what you're saying. It's okay.
Yeah.
So we
Tim
need.
must have it out. Yeah.
Are we on?
Yeah, Josh is. No, I was gonna go to.
Oh, sorry.
I don't
Tim.
use us. You let her talk.
Sorry. Forget someone.
Okay.
Can we mute our side and just let her talk?
She's doing the first section of it. Yeah, so can I be muted and we can listen to her
Let's
talk?
try that.
Yeah, so mute us.
The room.
Yes.
Julie, text me when I can start. Okay, hi everybody. So I'm going to go back to the first slide. My name is, excuse me. My name is Anna Maria and Julie is there with you in person. We are going to talk about how we buzzed through 2 different hives and made them into one. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. As you can already tell, this session is live and virtual, and we have been able to, well, continue to bend and be flexible with those 2 modules in place. The great part is that's how Julie and I worked through this whole entire process. I was virtual the whole entire time, and she was live and in person. The reason I am virtual now is because I am 9 months pregnant.
Really?
So I am holding the fort down here in my room, and she is holding the fort down there at Visti, but we make a really great dynamic pair. If you have any questions, please utilize the chat that we have featured. There's a Visti committee member in our live session. Hopefully they're waving right now, so you see where they are. And they'll be monitoring that chat. At the end of each session, we're going to take some time, we're going to take some time and we will give time for questions and answers. So we would like to know where you all are from. If you notice here, there is a lovely map of Virginia and there's all the regions represented by number. Take a look at the map, think about what region you represent. Keep that number in your head. And what I would like you to do is use your phone or use the meta.com code and put in your information and where you represent your region of Virginia. And Julie, why don't you text me? Oh. Should I stop talking? Sorry. Okay, so Julie said keep going, so I'm going to keep going. So
Okay.
as you see up here on the screen, there is a QR code for meta.com. Go ahead and put that code in, and we will find out where we all are from. And I'm going to click results in a couple of minutes. I'll give it like 1 more minute. And we will see who is from where in Virginia. And as I wait, I'm going to say thank you for your patience and for your kindness, as this has been an interesting way to start a session, you know? But let's see the results. Let's see. Okay, so we're kind of spread out all over the place. So we have some people in 1 and 2 and 4 and in 7. So that was just a little quick, where are we from? And if we had a little bit more time, we'd give more time to that. But Meta is a great way for you to have an interactive piece and to find out information about people or ask questions.
Okay.
All
Anna
right.
Maria, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, yes.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yes, I could hear you and you
Okay.
could hear me. All right. So we're going to go ahead with the virtual one and keep going. There's a lot of technical difficulties that were happening in the room.
Uh-huh.
So this is strictly virtual right now.
Okay, that's fine. So the 2 slides that I went over was just the housekeeping, and we're going to utilize the chat for the housekeeping, and then we are going to move forward in the rest of our presentation. So a little bit about Julie and I. My name is Anna Maria Stansel. I am an instructional facilitator of technology for Loudoun County Public Schools. I've been in education for 18 years, classroom teacher for about 10 years, and the tech coach for about 8 years. And I'm also part of the conference committee. I'm not there this year because I am pregnant. And then my partner in crime is Julie.
Oh.
Julie, tell them a little bit about you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with us and hanging on for a few extra minutes. I am an instructional facilitator of technology at Buffalo Trail Elementary School in Loudoun County, Virginia. I've been in education for 25 years. I've been classroom, adjunct professor, online professor, and taught at all sorts of presentations all around the place. And now I'm here with Anna Maria.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, I support the distance learning platform for Loudoun County, and it's brand new for the county this year. So I support K through 12 students and teachers. We also had 2 other lead Bs in this very important project, 2 first grade teachers, 1 first grade teacher from Buffalo Trail, Melissa, and another first grade teacher from our distance learning program, Dr. Robinson. So we had a what if question. And our what if question that we're going to dive into today is, we had a virtual class and a face-to-face class, and we want them to complete a coding project together. Can that happen? We're going to break our session up into 4 chunks for you. We're going to talk about the plan, what went into the planning process, structurally, what platforms did we use, and how did we keep meetings and communication open through all 4 educators, including with the students. We'll also talk about how we built a community. Julie will take over and talk about the curriculum and the connections, and then our grows and our glows as we reflect on this project. So we're going to talk about the plan as a whole. And the plan really came to be because there was a grant written, and the grant was granted, little plan words, to Dr. Robinson. So we're actually going to call her in via Google Meet, and we're going to cross our fingers. It should work. So I'm going to pull her in and she's going to speak on the project. And just give me a moment. She's not here yet, so we're going to see what happens. And I am going to contact her and tell her to join. One of the great things is with Google Meet is we were able to utilize Google Meet with our students, and then they were able to come in and out of our projects as well. This was their main vehicle of communication. So Dr. Robinson will be here momentarily. There she is. Hi, Dr. Robinson.
Look at your fun background.
All right, Dr. Robinson, you are going to talk about our plan as a whole and the grant. So I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay, good afternoon. Hello. The grant was actually sponsored by the Loudoun Education Fund, and then it had matching funds from Making a Difference grant from the Claude Moore Charitable Foundation. One of the things that we did is these grants help teachers to bring technology and other materials into the classroom. When we wrote the grant, it was done by the Buffalo Trail Elementary team, including Julie Kuzma and the first grade team, because what we realized last year when we were in distance learning is that students needed to be able to do more learning, not only hands-on, but technology. And since we were all in virtual learning, we decided to take the time that winter break and write the grant so that the students, there's 1,300 students at Buffalo Trail Elementary, would have the access to these BBOTs. How we continued was due to the pandemic, some of our students needed to stay in the virtual world. So the Buffalo Trail Elementary School received the BBOTs physically, but we wanted to be able to continue to have the virtual students also learn. So we tied these two systems together. That being the case, BBOTs was chosen because in 1950, George Devall actually developed the first robot for robotics and for programming, but education was a little bit slower getting on board. The universities were doing it, but the schools themselves were not. In 1975, the first robots themselves were starting to get used in the university sections. And then BBOTs started to come into play in 2000, but they weren't BBOTs at that time. They come in 2014. I believe it's Tufts University that actually created them and patented them. So we started using them so that the students could see that when they got into Schoology and Google Meets and doing Flipgrid, that the BBOT moves in the same direction as a program does. It's just going forward and backwards. So we did that easily so students could see that computers aren't scary. They're only scary if you let them be scary. We had all the students create physical BBOTs so that they could handle them. And then we've used the technology in both places. These first graders who are 6 years old can use Flipgrid. They've learned how to master Schoology, which is a program in itself. It's a platform for technology for education. They, of course, can program the BBOTs, and they're learning ABCs and math facts at the same time. Did I answer all the questions? I think I did, but I wanted to be sure.
Perfect. It was great, Dr. Robinson. Thank you so much.
And then we continue this year, and then the partnership and collaboration with the children together is also teaching them that you don't need to be on site to make friends or to program. You can be in the virtual world and make a significant amount of friendships. Though in the 1950s, when robotics were actually first introduced, of course, that would have been unheard of. Virtual friendships, virtual connections were not something that would have been normal. Phones were still at that time stuck to a cord in a wall.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to
All right.
say goodbye to Dr. Robinson. Thank you so very much in joining us and being our trailblazer when it came to this project.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye, you guys.
Bye. All right, so now that you have a little bit of background of the actual project as a whole, Dr. Robinson did mention one of the platforms that we used throughout this entire process, and that is called Schoology. It's a learning management system that Loudoun County Public Schools utilizes. They started last year, and we brought it to the forefront this year. It provided a central location for students to create videos for for students and teachers. And the teachers were able to create videos, tutorials, and then really give a guideline of how the project was going to roll out. So then students could have one central location to come, get information they needed, along with the IFTs and along with parents as well, because our virtual students, their parents are very intricate, especially with first graders, to help and support them. So the parents had a guide as well. So you can see here, there were links that were created. There's the website that we utilized to use the Bbot at first. We used it digitally. And then, as you can see, there's a wee video link here that was a how-to on how to get to the website. Videos for reflections. We also used Schoology as a way for students to reflect on how the project was going. We gave them sample questions, and then they could record themselves and share with each other how things were happening in a discussion platform. We then moved on a little bit further and talked about how they would work collaboratively as partners. We called them drivers and navigators. So the driver would be the student that actually be utilizing the physical Bbot, and the navigator would be the virtual student giving the directions or the coding for that person that was in person. So once we had a central location for everyone, we had a spot to put a lot of information, we needed to build a community. And the first community that needed to be built was between Julie and I, because we had never worked together. So Julie being from Buffalo Trail, and then me being from the distance learning program, we came together and we utilized Microsoft Teams. Now we did this and it was very informal. I found out Julie was from Jersey, I'm from Long Island, so that was a commonality right there, and we love to talk to each other. I think we spent like an hour and a half just kind of getting to know one another and our coaching style, our backgrounds, and things of that nature. So building that rapport and that bond between the two of us was crucial, because we were really building the scaffolding and the platforms for the teachers and then for the students. So there are multiple platforms that we had put together for our teachers and for our students. One of the platforms that we used, like I said before, was Microsoft Teams. This was used between Julie and I, and then was also used on a weekly basis with the two other first grade teachers. So I think it was Thursdays from 3 to 3:30. Once dismissal was over at Buffalo Trail, the four of us would get together on Microsoft Teams, and we would talk about what went well, questions we had about things that might not have gone well, where we want to go, and wonderings about directions or videos or or if we had to write letters to parents or things of that nature. Another platform that we utilized was Flipgrid, and Flipgrid was used for students so they can build rapport with one another, because that was the next step as well. Those students had to build a rapport from the digital world to the brick and mortar world. Email also was a very important platform when we used to recap notes, to just shoot out questions, things of that nature. And then, of course, the G Suite, utilizing Google Forms, Google Docs. We created actually a shared drive that I'll show you in a minute, where we kept a lot of our information just to keep everything in one central location. Videos were created as tutorials for students and for parents. We then uploaded them into WeVideo and put those into Schoology, so then people had easy access and didn't have to worry about any coding or anything like that. So, like I said, one of the platforms was Flipgrid. I'm going to show you the admin side of Flipgrid to keep the names and the faces of the students private here. But two of the topics that we created was an all about me, for students to get to know one another. And then the next was the morning meeting, where students were able to utilize that morning meeting time and share greetings with each other. So the all about me was really super important. Julie and I modeled that first, where we talked a little bit about ourselves, and then students were able to respond. We had really, really high activity on this, about 46 responses, which was super great. The other big platform that we utilized to collaborate was Google Doc. So within Google Docs, we created a live lesson plan of sorts. And within that live lesson plan, it really broke down into a timeline for us by week. This was a living document, so it could change weekly as we met and discussed. We always had a note taker. They went in, they made the changes. We put links in here, how-tos in here, things that we needed to work on first, things we need to work on second. I think I actually have the link. Yeah, I think this might be, let me go back. Oops, I apologize. Yeah, I don't. I have it up here. Here. Actually, I'll back it up just 1 second. So this is our shared drive. We actually made a shared drive just for us. So within that shared drive, we had our Bebop template for our lesson plan. We also had our letters written to parents, and then we had specific things that we needed to push out on specific days to teachers as well. So I'll come to the template here so you all can see it. And here we broke it down by who were the teachers involved. We put the standards of learning in there for computer science. And then we also had the meet up there as well, so easy access for people to reference later. We always had the task mentioned, the duration of time, and what tools were going to be used. So nothing was out of the ordinary and everybody was on the same page at the same time. And as we had our weekly meetings, this is what was written and was brought down into bite-sized pieces for people. So we had all the information together. We started the project back in September, actually, and we just finished up, went all the way throughout Thanksgiving. And we finished up, I want to say, yep, the week of the 29th. And after that, we also had information about the hook, what platforms we'd be using, what materials we'd be using. So then teachers and students, as well as the IFTs, knew what was happening on a regular basis. Okay, go back here. Present again. So now that we have rapport with our IFTs and we have a structure and we have the living lesson plan for actual instruction, the next thing we wanted to really focus on was the students. So their intro. We utilized Google Meet for the students to come together. Julie and I were talking and we were thinking they're going to have 20 minutes. What is that 20 minutes going to look like? So as the coaches, we wanted to facilitate that time and make it structured as possible. So it wasn't something that the teachers had to really stress about and worry about, because our goal with this project was to be more of the facilitator and then provide that gradual release of responsibility. So through each stage, the teacher had that guidance. And then the next time that they were to work with the students, let's say later on the school year, they'd have more independence because they'd have these structures in place and they could refer back to through our shared drive and through all of our notes. So here's an example here of the time frame, the amount of time, virtual students and the Buffalo Trail students. And we had the framework there for everybody, so everyone knew what was happening. And then the students, there was no surprises, and it really, really worked so well. Here are some pictures that you can see where our virtual students, you can see up here, were all on the interactive board. And then we actually had Buffalo Trail's principal stop by to say hello. And then we had students come up to the actual device for the classroom and have an intro. We had wondering questions and what they're excited about. And one of the really cool things about this experience when they did their first meet and greet, one of the first graders from Buffalo Trail actually recognized one of the first graders from distance learning because they were in the same kindergarten class. And it was like this magical moment. We went, oh, I know you, I know you. So it made it a little bit more real and that much more exciting in the first intro when they got together. So more ways for students to get to know one another was for them to create those videos. And that was through Flipgrid that I showed you a couple of minutes ago. We actually pushed out a letter for parents as well, so they knew what to expect and how to create the Flipgrid video. I created a how-to here on how to actually utilize Flipgrid, what buttons to press, what questions should be asked, what the join code was. So we really scaffolded the parents as well and gave them timelines and prompted them on what to say so they didn't feel out of the loop either. The final piece for students to get to know one another was for them to create an actual BBot from the art world. So we brought in our art teachers and we asked them to help the students to create a physical BBot if they didn't have the actual robotic one. So not all of our students on the distance learning platform are going to be able to use that actual robot. So we wanted them to create their own, and they shared it through Flipgrid. And here are some of the pictures of what students created. It was a really great makerspace opportunity for our Buffalo Trail students. They did this in class with Ms. Kuzma, and they had paper and crayons and all sorts of things that they could put together to build their model representation of the actual robot itself. Here are some more pictures of them going on to Flipgrid and introducing themselves to their friends in virtual Loudoun. I'm going to stop right there to see if we have any questions because we're already up to part 3 and it's already 4:04. So Julie, do we have any questions, or wondering if we do?
We do not have any posted. However, if you do, feel free to unmute your mic and let us know if you have any questions up until this point. Nope, not quite yet. Oh,
All right.
was someone going to start talking? Nope.
Yep. We're all good.
Okay, so now I'm going to pick up here. And as we all know, when we create lessons that are going to have some kind of technology, they all really need to be driven by our content. So as Sherry and Melissa came to us and they said, this is what we want to do, we kept going back. What is your end goal? What is the content that you want to have covered? Because from that point, then we can design what the activity is going to be. Because at the utmost goal, when this is over, we need our students to say, I learned, or I was able to do, and have it connect to one of the standards. So the standards that we have listed on the page right now are some of the standards that were covered in there. And we had gone back and forth doing this. There was a whole lot more standards that were covered, a lot more surprises, and we're going to get to those in a couple minutes. But the ultimate goal was for students to be able to spell words. That was it. They were going to have to use decode words in order to figure out what the secret word was. That was the ultimate goal. So the students would be given some snap words, a vowel would be missing, and they would have to figure out what the vowel is and read the word. That was the ultimate goal of the project. All right, can you go ahead and go to the next one? So knowing that, go ahead, perfect, thank you. So we have our technology standards. Now, my school is a computer science school. So that means there's all sorts of new computer science. They want us to use the terminology, they want us to use the tools. But what we wanted to make sure was that we were really pulling in the standards that that these students are going to be doing. So, come on back. There we go. So actually the computer science standard and the digital learning standards, both of those are linked to the actual documents on VDOE. But all of those items that were listed there, these are kind of like the behind the scenes ahas that the students were able to accomplish. So just through the process of completing everything that they had to do for this project, these were just embedded in there. So if you were in a school right now and they're saying, we need you to include the computer science standards, at no point did we sit down and say, we're going to make sure that this extra piece is part of it. Those 3 items under computer science standards, they were just part of it. They just happened because they were there, because in order to complete the project, it had to happen. When you come down to the digital learning standards, that is something that came out, I believe, this year or last year. And these are the new standards that we need to also include. So I'm a classroom teacher. I have to do my SOLs. I have to add computer science. I have to do digital learning and all the other things. It can feel overwhelming. But if you take a minute and read through those, we can give you examples of how these items were embedded in there without us ever giving a separate lesson to do it. So like, for example, 1.1, we need to give an algorithm. So because the students have to do an algorithm, but in order to move the B-bot around the map, they had to give each other step-by-step directions in order to complete the goal. So they ended up creating an algorithm for that. If I was to use the word debug, well, if they coded the B-bot to go to the wrong vowel, they had to figure out how it went to the wrong vowel, what the mistake was, then they had to go try again. We never at any point said this is a separate debugging lesson. It was just embedded in there. It was just part of it. All right, any questions at all? Awesome, let's keep on moving. All right, so up until this point, the 4 educators have been together. Anna Maria and I have handled the technology integration. Melissa and Sherry have handled the content. And then we found a way to work together and combine both of our expertise to create this project. But with Anna Maria's job and our job is eventually to teach them, what do they say, to make sure, kind of teach them out of your own job. So what we need to do is empower them to feel confident, to be able to do this on your own. We're still there for the support. However, this is the time that they get to kind of go and be like, well, we've done it with doing snap words and missing vowels. What if we did the same project, but we did it with addition? So instead of me looking at the word run and having to figure out the vowel U, this time I want to do 3 + 2, and I have to find the square that says 5. So instead of a U on the mat, we're going to have a 5. Instead of coding to a letter, we're coding to a number. So the concept of the coding, the students understand really well. The content is what will be changed. And it's at this point now that the teachers are going to be the ones that are going to drive all of this the way the path is going to go. We're still there to support them. We're still there to assist them, but now they're the ones that are going to be leading this as it moves forward. Now, in my building, we do have a computer science specialist. So there is another resource they can pull in to continue their path to move forward. All right, if you can move on down to the next slide. So then the most important part here was, let's talk about some grows and glows, because we all know that when you do a project with a class of 20 students, you're going to have some bumps in the road. But with this project, we had 2 classes of 20 students. We had 1 class was live. So if they're like, well, I can't figure out how to make the computer work, I can come over and I can show them, I can point to them, or I could fix it for them. When Sherry's students, when the virtual students had an issue, it was strictly dependent on verbal, and that was it. And she had to give the directions verbally in order to fix the issue, to find out what's going on. But ultimately, the student is the one that needed to fix everything. Some other glows that we had was very quickly, I believe that once the 2 classes met, it was no longer 2 classes. It was one class was live, one half of it was live and half was virtual. But we were able to create that community because Sherry and Melissa are such good friends. Anna Maria and I were connected right away. And the 4 of us together were a really great team. And like she said before, when we were doing the whole class introductions and the one student said, Mrs. Cosma, come here. And he calls me over. I know that one. And at that point, it made it real. At that point, the students were like, wait a second, they're actual children, they're actual students. And I know who they are. And it really gave it that live piece that we wanted it to do. Then there was so many parts of technology that was used. Now, if you were to ask the 4 adults, we can name what was used. If you were to ask the children, they just figured out how to spell a word. Everything was so embedded so seamlessly with everything that the content, the focus was always on the content. There was no given time that the students were like, I have to use this tool. Through that Schoology course where we had instructional videos that were placed in there, through it, and the students watching it, they were able to understand it. The advantage of putting the instructional videos that were created and placed in there was the students got the same instruction. So it wasn't that I would go into Melissa's room and I would teach one way with my own language, even though we're still getting to the same goal. And Anna Maria would go in Dr. Robinson's room and she would teach her way. And then we had to come together and figure out what the connection was. It was one teacher presenting at the students through a video, and it was incredibly smooth because all the students, for one, are so used to doing this because they've been doing it for a year and a half now. So now these students, there you go. They're so keeping in mind now, everyone's like, these kids are coming back. They've never been in school. It's a challenge for them. And those of you that are teaching in person right now, we know that it's been a challenge this year, getting these students back to almost like the school preparedness that we need them to be. But the one huge advantage that we saw over and over and over is that the learning curve of using the technology just didn't exist. It was just so smooth because the kids were so used to doing so much of this on their own and doing it through the computer that the stuff that they knew really well. The items they didn't know well, it was just time of just give me a moment, I'm going to figure it out. And there's a video that we're going to share with you in a little bit, and how one of our students became one of the teachers, and we all just kind of sat back and watched, which goes into the virtual first grade students did lead the face-to-face students quite a few times. So if we can go ahead and move on to the next screen. So in this video here, you're going to see how one student assisted another student. So right now we're in my classroom in Buffalo Trail, and on the screen is Dr. Robinson's class, and he's helping him to share his screen.
Restart. Press the X and then another. Okay, try it again.
Oh, darn it. All right, go ahead back. I'll just talk about it. So in this video, the child that was in my room needed to share her screen, and she was having a harder time with it. So the young man that was in the virtual school was walking her through every step. And as he would go through it, did you find it? And she'd give him a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So the virtual student understood, if I keep my microphone off and if I use hand signals, then I'll know where she's at and what I need to do. And there were often times that he would give directions and he would need to go back and he would need to figure out a different way to explain it. So these virtual students are not only learning how to go through all of the technology, but they're understanding how to rethink their words. They're understanding how to go back through, readjust what they're saying. Okay, so let's go ahead to the next screen, the next slide.
Restart.
Yeah.
Press the X.
All right, so now let's talk about some grows, because we all know nothing always goes 100% perfectly. We know that. So when we got to the final project, the image on the right where it has the question marks in there, so C question mark N, B question mark LL, those are all their snap words. And what we wanted the students to do was look on this. They were going to use the picture to the left, figure out what the word is, and then they would have to code it, the B-bot, to get to that letter on the mat. Well, we went to go share the screens, and now we ran into some pickles. The students are 6 years old. They have to share their screen. They have to go back. They have to do all of this coding. Did not work well. So we had to adjust on the fly. So at this point, we're in my classroom. We have students in my room. We have students in virtual meets. We had 4 different meets set up. So, and nothing was working. So if you go to the next screen, it will show you. Oh, could you go back to the main slide and just go to the next slide? Thank you. All right. So this is what we needed them to do. We needed to name the missing letter, press the buttons on the B-bot and go. That was the ultimate goal. And as much as we wanted that Google slide to be beautiful and use it, it was just not going to be an option. So can you go ahead to the next slide, please? So what you're going to see in this video here. So you see the mat on the floor, and that's just a large piece of paper, a poster printer that was laminated. And you'll see in the young man's hand that he is now holding an index card. So we went from the Google slide to quickly made the index cards. On the board, you'll see that there are vowels, and the student will need to figure out how to move the B-bot. So this is sitting on the floor. The virtual meet computer is sitting on the table with the camera facing down so that the students are able to see this. So can you go ahead and hit play on this?
Okay, so it stopped right here. Where's your keyboard now?
What?
Press the up button, go straight. So press the up button. Nope, up, yep. Then what?
Let's go!
Press the right. Okay, put it back to the home button on the screen. Then straight, press the up button. Yep, and then put the keyboard on the yellow sticky.
So in that video, you heard the voice that sounded a little muffled in the video. That was the student in the virtual room giving directions of what to do. So we had the navigator was on the virtual one, and the driver was down in my room. All right, can you go ahead to the next slide, please? Okay, some other pickles that we ran into was that there was a lot of directions that were given. And for some students, like the young man in the previous video, it went great. But in this one, it was not as successful. So we ended up taking Post-it notes and we cut them in half, which is why you see the pink rectangles. And first, what they did was they told us what the directions were. As they told us, we wrote the arrows so that they can see it move around on the floor before they would go ahead and move the B-bot. And this was the result of having that extra visual step.
Is that better? Okay. All right.
So what was great about this was there was, as we would go through this, and if we hit some bumps in the road, we would just quickly come up with a plan. The thing is, during all of the bumps, at no point were the students flustered. They're like, all right, that didn't work, let's try again. That didn't work, let's try again. If I was to go back to my computer science words, I just have to debug the problem. And that was exactly what was happening. So although up until this point, we have not named that specific task as debugging, the students already understand what it is. All right, so let's go ahead to the next slide, please. So when we look back, these are the digital tools that we needed to use. So Schoology, that was our main learning management system. We had one course for both classes. Microsoft Teams was used for the teacher collaboration. So we had our weekly meetings and everything was always posted in Microsoft Teams, be it the chat, be it the video, and sometimes files were shared. Flipgrid is what we use for the students to create communication with each other. So prior to the Google Meets, they would create a video and they would share the video and everyone had access to it. So I was able to find my partner's video, see the B-bot that they made, and then I was able to comment on it. Google Meet is the tool that we used for our student collaboration, because that's the one that our county supports. And then the tool that we chose is a B-bot. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So what I want you to think about now, there we go. So what I want you to think about in hearing about this project is these were essentially the 5 pieces that we needed to use to make this project a success. We had our 2 classroom teachers that were willing to learn, that were willing to embrace everything that all this was. We had a set schedule that we set up. We had one meeting from 8 weeks, every Thursday afternoon, that everyone knew that that time was always set aside for all of us. There was a lot of other communication that would happen, different emails and different texts and things, but our weekly meeting, that was our summary meeting that we used. We had the coaches, which is myself and Anna Maria, that would guide the teachers through it. Then over to the left, we always made sure that we kept returning to the skill. We kept saying, what is it that you want the students to achieve? That was always a revisited question so that we would be able to do this. And then the training, think about what you have access to. For us, our training came from either research that we did on our own, or it was videos that we created that we would train to other people, be it the teachers or the students. So take a moment and think, if you were to do something like this on your, within your class, within your school, what is it that you can use for those pieces? Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So that is, in summary, our project, how we put it together. Do you have any questions or any comments, any clarifications that you would like to learn about? Right, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions. You have our contact information there. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to reach out. We would love to talk with you. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.